So the next of our big ideas is related to material from Quiz 13. I hope you've all had a chance to take it by now. And obviously, it's about fear and the things that we're afraid of. Over the weekend, I asked you to respond to this survey question. About 28 of you did, so thanks for that. If you didn't get a chance, take a look here and maybe just kind of mentally come up with an answer, right? So you're supposed to think forward. Things are back to normal. We're back in classes face to face. And I want you to imagine the number of people who died in school shootings over a 12-year period. And then that number of people are going to die on one single day on November 4th, 2020, a Wednesday. If you were going to be at school, would you be afraid? Okay. And the survey shows that you would generally be afraid. Most of you a lot, some of you a little, and only 5 of you said, no, I wouldn't be afraid. Yep. Now, it turns out there is a correct answer to this question. And right now you're thinking, there he goes again, right? Who is this guy to tell me what I'm supposed to be afraid of? It's me. I'm telling you, there's a correct answer to this question. And the correct answer is no. So now you believe me even less. It's like, you gotta be kidding me. Not gonna be afraid of all that death? The answer is no. Obviously, I have to prove it to you. I have to show you, I have to tell you why you shouldn't be afraid and why you are afraid. Even though most of you are afraid. None of you should be. It goes back to my 2 favorite concepts with the terrible names because they're so hard to keep straight. The reasoning systems that we have available to us. System 1 and System 2. All right. Remember, System 1. That's the fast, automatic. It's based on emotion. Answers just kind of pop into your head. It makes use of heuristics or shortcuts. And then System 2 is the logical, step-by-step procedure that, if you use it, it's going to give you the right answer. So in this case, System 2 is really nothing more than a math problem. We're talking about the risk of some event, okay? And so it's just a simple probability, a simple fraction in which you take the numerator being the number of people who died, okay, over that 12-year period, and then the denominator is the number of people who could have died. So we can do this right now. It turns out the harder of the 2 is the numerator. Okay? So I used Wikipedia. The reason I use Wikipedia is because the number is all in one place for me. This is kind of what Wikipedia is for. I'm not trying to get this published in any academic journal. It's going to give us a basic idea. But the other and more important reason is Wikipedia gives a large number. For example, there is an article in the Washington Post published about a year ago that counted up the number of deaths and had a number closer to half that, so closer to 100. So we're going to pick the largest number. By the way, if you're interested, there is a listing in Wikipedia on school shootings. It's in a table format, so I just went through and I counted them all up. Okay. You might think, maybe they missed some. Okay. So let's make it larger. We'll triple it. Okay. So instead of 202, we're going to say that there are 600 or so, 606 in our numerator. Now, for the denominator, we need the number of students and the number of teachers, faculty, in the United States in K through 12 and at colleges and universities. This is a relatively simple and straightforward Google search. You want to look for reliable numbers. So this is the National Center for Education Statistics. They found then, I think this is 2019 numbers, about 57 million students in K through 12, about 3.7 million teachers in K through 12, about 20 million college students, and then about 1,700,000 college and university teachers. And realize we could add more there because there are other employees that would be part of this as well. But just to keep things simple and straightforward, and to give us a smaller number in the denominator, which will also kind of increase the perceived risk, we're going to stick here. Now we're just going to do the division. 606 divided by the sum of 57 million plus 3,700,000 plus 20 million plus 1,700,000. Is that 0.0000007? By the way, is this going to happen? Is it going to be the case that we are going to have 12 years worth of school shooting deaths on a single day? No, it's not going to happen. But even if it did, in this absolute nightmare of a scenario, we had more than a decade's worth of deaths on a single day. That would be your chance of dying. I say, I contend that the correct amount of fear to have for an event that unlikely is 0 to 5 decimal points. You might say, well, it's not just dying. I could get shot and injured. I'd be afraid of that as well. Well, then use the number that I tripled, because remember, this is triple the number. That is actually the number of deaths and injuries. Okay, and if you want to increase it even more, you want to increase it by a factor of 10, fine, take off a 0. This is a very, very, very small probability. Those are the facts. Those are the numbers. That's what System 2 tells us. Now, before I get too far, I should point out, I'm not saying that I don't care about this, right? I care deeply. Right? I think one death is too many deaths. And I already told you, look, I'm a liberal. I'm in favor of very, very strong gun control. I said a second ago, one death is too many. When I hear about stories in the news about them, it literally feels sick to my stomach. It makes me angry, makes me sad. As I've gotten older, I've noticed that I'm actually more emotional. I cry sometimes. Okay. So I am very concerned about this because I think the number should be 0. But that's different from being afraid. I have not one bit of fear about this. Okay? Another way to think about this: do we have a gun violence problem in the United States? Yeah, I think we do. You know how many gun deaths there were last year in the United States? About 40,000. 40,000. There are an average of 15 to 20 school shooting deaths a year. 40,000. We have an enormous gun violence problem in the United States. School shootings are a very small part of that. Again, I want the number to be 0, but I'm just not afraid. So I think why are people getting this so wrong? Why do we not use System 2? A lot of people, they just don't feel the need to. A fear level, not a number, a fear level kind of just pops into our head, right? That's what System 1 does, without any effort whatsoever. And then, of course, we've got overconfidence. So we're going to have this level of fear, and we're going to be sure that we're right. Okay? But beyond that, even if we knew that there was some kind of procedure that we should perform, most people haven't really sat down and thought, oh, how would I actually calculate this? So they don't even know how to do it. Instead, they're using System 1. System 1, remember, said it's principally using these shortcuts, these heuristics. And in this type of situation, the specific heuristic that we use is called the availability heuristic. Note what we're trying to do is we're judging the frequency or the likelihood of some event. That's too hard to do. We don't know how to do that. So the shortcut is we basically turn it into a memory task. We think, okay, can I think of examples of that event? And to the extent that we can think of those examples easily, we're going to judge the event as common. To be more technical, to the extent that that event type is available to memory, right? We can retrieve it easily. We're going to judge that it's common. So the problem is the frequency might not be the only reason that something is available to our memories. Could be how vivid the event is, right? How sensationalized it is. Could be how many times we heard it. So if we heard a single event described 15 times, that's going to make it very, very memorable. That's going to make us think that that event type is more frequent. That's what the availability heuristic does. So we fear this particular event and many other events just way, way out of proportion to their actual risk to us. But you might say, so what, right? I like to take precautions, right? If I die, that's the end, right? There's a pretty serious risk I'm taking here. There's not that much of a big deal here if I'm more afraid than I need to be. I think there is. I got several reasons why this is a problem. So reason number one, I like to think of human beings as limited capacity information processing systems. Right? Pretty fancy word, or fancy set of words that just basically means we can't pay attention to everything. We have limited capacity. And to a first approximation, we can basically pay attention to one thing at a time. So if you're out there focusing on these really, really tiny probability risks, maybe you're not focusing on things that are risks. Because I'm not saying don't take precautions. I'm not saying, right, be completely carefree and careless. Right? We might not pay attention to the real risks. What are you going to die from? Right? Of course, nobody knows for sure, but hey, you know what? If we're going to use the numbers here, you're probably going to die from heart disease. It's the number one killer. Cancer is number two killer. All right, let's leave COVID-19 out of it for now because we don't quite know what the real long-term risk of that is. This is something that, and it's not because I'm 56, 57 years old and getting up there in years. I actually have thought about this a lot. Okay? The reason for that is that, as I think you know, I was diagnosed with lupus about 10 years ago. And one of the things I learned is as a result of that illness, I had a 10 to 20% chance of not surviving for the next 20 years. All right, so average that out and say a 15% chance of dying. Which one should I pay attention to? Right, because the fact of the matter is there are things that I can do today that will improve my chances. There are things that you can do today to reduce the likelihood that you're going to die prematurely of heart disease. Right? So I'm going to pay attention to those. And I'm going to ignore the very, very low probability things. Okay? But it gets worse. Because think about the world that we're creating by doing this. Chances are, yes, you have had a lockdown drill. probably not in college, but in high school, junior high, elementary school, well over 90% of schools in the United States have lockdown drills. But you know what? Not one shred of evidence that they work. Not a one. Article about a year ago in The Atlantic, a magazine that I love, by the way. This was an unbelievable article. The only thing I hated about it is I wish I had written it, because these are things I've been saying for a while. But they thought to write it first. A major part of the article, they talked about lockdown drills and how ineffective they are, and how horrifying they can be. And so they told stories, for example, about a school that held a lockdown drill, and they didn't tell the kids it was a drill. Think about that. These kids actually thought they were going to die that day. Dead kids vomiting, passing out in fear. Another case where a student in a lockdown drill that he didn't know was a drill texted his parents and said, "I'm sorry for everything that I ever did wrong. I hope you can learn to go on without me." That's horrifying. Even if they worked, we're talking about saving 20 lives a year. But they don't work. As I told you a few minutes ago. Not one shred of evidence that they are effective, and some suggestion that they are the opposite of effective. Parkland High School, the one from February 2018, they had a lockdown drill about a month before the shooting. Experts think that the piece of shit who did the shooting learned what to do from the lockdown drill. If you are traditional college age, maybe you know this, maybe you don't, your generation suffers from levels of anxiety we have never seen before. Off the chart levels of anxiety. And this is way before COVID-19. Why is that? Probably a lot of contributing factors, but I'll tell you, I certainly think one of them is you literally grew up having people tell you that somebody, some stranger, somebody's going to burst into your school one day and shoot you to death. Seems like that sort of thing would lead to a fair amount of anxiety. But it gets worse. I purposely picked as the starting date for this the day of the Northern Illinois shootings because they were literally close to home. DeKalb, Illinois. As you might know, we send more students to Northern Illinois University than any other transfer institution. I know it was true then. I think it's still true now. And it was just the weirdest day. A lot of students were gone because they had friends who went to Northern, and they drove out to DeKalb to console their friends. Obviously it was all everybody was talking about. And I remember standing around with a group of faculty members, the people who were, at the time, they were in my office suite. And one of them looked around the group. There were 6 of us. And she looked around the group and she said, I don't know what I'm going to do. She said, I'm terrified. She said, I have to go to class today. And I turn my back on my students every day. You understand that? This is one of your teachers who actually thought that a student was going to shoot her in the back when she was writing on the board. By the way, if we were meeting face to face, this would be the time when I would turn my back on you and I would joke that I'm not daring you. I'm basically telling you I trust you. I don't think you're going to kill me. That's the world I want to live in. I don't want to live in the world where I think my students want to kill me. But that's what we create when we think any kid in a trench coat is using it to hide a gun. You know what's going to happen if I'm wrong? Right? You know, if somebody walks into my classroom, aims a gun at me, shoots, you know what's going to happen? I'm going to die. And I'll try and get out of the way, but I don't think I'm fast enough. I'll die that day. I'm just going to count on the probability that it's not going to happen. In fact, I will literally stake my life on it. I will do nothing to protect myself. Now, before you go thinking, oh, he's actually not fulfilling one of his responsibilities, I do have a responsibility to prepare you. Now, obviously, we're not in classrooms, but assuming that you are going to return to a classroom, here's the training. Okay? I'm not making fun of this. I'm not being flippant. Here's the training. If somebody's going to shoot, the first thing you try and do is run. If it's too dangerous to run, then you hide. And if the hiding doesn't work, you get discovered, then you fight. That's it. That's the training. Run, hide, fight if you need to. Or you just do like me. Just assume it's not going to happen. But it gets worse. It is the case that throughout history, politicians, and I won't pick on any specific ones right now, politicians manipulate the public by using the availability heuristic to get them to fear the wrong things, to get them to fear things out of proportion to reality so that they can manipulate them, so that they can stay in power, stay in office, get in power, get in office. So I will pick one specific politician to illustrate this. As you might realize, I am not a fan of our president, Donald Trump. You could make a very strong argument, and I am about to, that he is president today in large part because of the availability heuristic. Now, if you are a fan of Donald Trump, right, if you think he is a great president, well, give credit where credit is due. The availability heuristic played a very large role in that. I am not a fan. I am, in fact, horrified that this man is our president. Many of his supporters even admit he is a despicable human being. I personally believe that it will be decades before we can undo the damage that he has done. So I'm not so happy about the role of the availability heuristic in getting this guy elected. Here's how it happened. Back in the beginning of the primary for the Republican nomination before the 2016 election, there were 17 candidates. Donald Trump was one of 17, and he was not considered a serious candidate. In fact, his candidacy was literally considered a joke. Yeah, I mean, literally. So picture the news talking heads, and they're talking about the candidates. And then somebody would say, well, what about Donald Trump? And the rest of the panel would laugh out loud. Nobody gave him a serious shot because he was a joke. And then something happened. Terrorism in the United States changed from being completely out of people's minds, because we were well after 9/11, completely out of people's minds, to being the number one issue on voters' minds, because there were two terrorist attacks that occurred, I think it was about 3 weeks apart from each other. One of them was in Paris, France, and one of them was in San Bernardino, California. Both happened to have been committed by Muslim extremists. Right? And in the blink of an eye, all of a sudden, people started fearing terrorism again. And Donald Trump seized on it. That was when he announced his total and complete ban on Muslims entering the United States until we can figure out what the hell is going on. That is nearly a quote. As a result of that, he became the front runner. And he never looked back. But you would say, well, come on. I mean, a lot happened after that. Of course, a lot happened after that. But the key thing was for him to get to the top of the pile. See, because when there were 17 candidates, there were so many, similar to what they did in the Democratic primary earlier in the season. They couldn't fit them all on one stage. They split them into two. They had the televised debates for the serious candidates, and then they had a non-televised debate for the people who were polling in the low single digits. That's where he would have been. Nobody would have even heard the things that he was saying. Okay? He had to get to the top, and he used the availability heuristic to get there. Again, I get it. I understand. He has a lot of fans. If you are one of them, you should seriously be thanking the availability heuristic. But I'm not one of them, so I'm not happy about it. Back in an earlier time, the last time we were fearing terrorism, I'm going to tell you a little story because I really do live the way that I'm talking right now. And so, as you know, on September 11th, 2001, we had the worst terrorist attack in our country's history. After that happened, there were lots of reports that there were going to be additional attacks. And in particular, there was a lot of fear that they were going to be attacking, the terrorists were going to be attacking what they called soft targets. So there's a lot of chatter out there that they're going to be attacking malls during Halloween weekend. So guess what I did on October 27th, Halloween weekend, 2001. Yep. Went to the mall. Brought my family. We had dinner at the Rainforest Cafe, which was at Woodfield Mall at the time. We had the restaurant to ourselves. We were the only ones there outside the people who had to be there for work. In closing, I want to talk about one seemingly obvious example. Say, why didn't I use COVID-19 for the availability heuristic? And there turns out there are two reasons where I think it doesn't fit very well. I mean, it sort of does fit, but it's way more complicated than just a simple, your risk of dying from a school shooting kind of thing. First, we know so little about this disease that we really don't have the numbers available to us to find out, to do that calculation. The range that I've seen of possible infection before this is all done is from 20% to 90% of the population. How do you use that to calculate a risk? Right? It's just, again, there's not enough information to do it. And then the other thing is, it's not so much the risk of getting it, right? The risk of most people getting it is pretty small. You're going to get a bad cold or a flu seeming thing. Um, um, it's really the risk of transmitting that to somebody else and then transmitting that to somebody else. And then each person who gets it might give it to up to 3 other people, and that kind of exponential growth. And then somewhere along the line, it's not you, it might not even be the person that you give it to. It might be 3 generations later of transmission where 15 people die because of the disease that they got originally, at least at one point along the line from you. So it's kind of hard to judge, what the risk actually is. There's the risk of getting it, and then there's the risk of dying, and there's the risk of transmitting it to somebody else who will die. And that just seemed way too complicated to try and work into this description here. I will stop here. And once again, thanks for listening. I hope you appreciated this. And I really do hope that you start living this way as I do. All right. I'm not saying don't be careful. I exercise every single day, in part because I have a very, very high risk of heart disease as a result of my lupus. I have an excellent diet. In part because I want to stay healthy. I want to reduce my risk of dying from all these complications that result from lupus. Take precautions, but take the right ones. Thanks.